Hello, everybody. Eliman Dambell here, of course, of Tradeview Markets. Now, what we are going to be doing this week, as every single week, is essentially analyzing the biggest storyline currently taking place in the world of financial trading. Now, as it pertains to this week, the eyes of the trading world is firmly placed on tomorrow's FOMC minutes report. Of course, last month, October, saw the rates there in the US essentially cut by 0.25 of a percentage. So what we are going to be seeing tomorrow when the minutes are essentially released is the reasoning and are the reasons behind somewhat that cut taking place. Now, what we are going to be doing prior to the announcement tomorrow essentially is analyzing some of the markets where we believe some opportunities potentially can be created. But guys, again, each and every single time we do have these sessions, it goes without saying that these sessions aren't here to provide advice. We aren't here to provide advice as it pertains to myself, as it pertains to Tradeview. It's just a case of giving you an overview of what is currently taking place. And of course, it is down to you to make the decision to where you believe the opportunities can be created. Now, as it pertains to opportunities being created, of course, Tradeview Markets, STP ECN broker, we do have a variety of different platforms in which traders can essentially use from the MT4 to the MT5, C Trader, Sterling Rhino, and quite a few other platforms in which we use. Now, of course, as it pertains to these sessions, we will predominantly be looking at the MT4, and I will be moving on to the MT4 platform very quickly. But if you do have any issues, any questions as it pertains to any of these platforms or Tradeview, do feel free to reach out to us. Now, of course, we did say earlier on that the eyes of the trading world is firmly glancing towards tomorrow's FOMC minutes. Absolutely, that is the case, but we do have quite a few other pieces of fundamental information taking place, or fundamental events rather taking place this week. Of course, tomorrow we have the ECB financial stability review. We have CPI numbers coming out of Canada. Of course, the big one, the FOMC minutes taking place there tomorrow. Then the day after, of course, we have the OE. I'm horrible when it comes to these abbreviations, but we have the OECD economic outlook for the Eurozone, which will be very interesting. And you can see in general, we do have quite a lot of Euro-related sentiment taking place this given week. Of course, you have Japanese CPI numbers as well. And continuing with the Eurozone, of course, Francine Lagarde there speaking in Frankfurt later on this week as well. Now, in saying that, let's move on to the MT4 platform. As we said earlier on, we are going to be looking at the markets where we believe the FOMC minutes report could potentially create a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty, and henceforth some opportunities for traders like yourself to potentially capitalize on. Now, coming into this week, we've seen a variety of different storylines. From the continuous highs in which we have been seeing in the S&P over the last few days, to the situation with gold, of course, the other week, having damn near and I like to usually refer to it as the $30 drop in less than 24 hours. But if you look at it from the grand scheme of things, gold fell in 5 days from a period from a price of around 15.13 all the way down to around 14.46 in the space of around 4 or 5 days. So huge drops there in gold. The euro dollar as well, we have seen somewhat of a rally over the last few days. Now you do see some uncertainty heading into the markets where we are now. But what we are going to do, we're going to start off with the S&P. We are going to be looking at those three markets in a bit more depth to try and paint the picture to see where the opportunities could be. But we will start off that by looking at the S&P. Now, as we said with the S&P, we saw the tweet last week, of course, from your man Donald Trump, essentially, in which he did say this year did see us being in a position of having 21 days in which the S&P had reached record highs. Now, when it comes to these record highs, what we do need to understand, of course, entering new territory sometimes is hard to ascertain or even try and predict or forecast where we believe the markets may be heading next. If you do look at the charts, you do see the previous instances where we saw those historical highs, what it was followed by. We saw historical highs or huge rallies. We saw what it was followed by. Now we've seen another ascending run take place. The question a lot of traders are asking or even anticipating, essentially saying, what's going to happen next? Are we going to see an end to this run? Are we going to see a fall from grace when it comes to these US indexes and indices? Now, as currently positioned, what we always have here, each and every single chart, I normally try to just use a very, very similar form of analysis. So we have the 10-day moving average there in red, 25-day moving average there in blue, and of course the 50-day rather moving average there in olive green. Now, the last time we saw the markets in a similar pattern, the last record high, you had the 10-day, you had the 25 and the 50, essentially all going up. But we know, guys, usually what goes up at some stage has correction and does come down. We saw those downwards crossover take place there once before. We saw those downwards crossovers take place twice before. Now, again, the question is, can it be third time lucky here? Of course, now we can see the markets today starting to consolidate already. If we go into, let's say, a 1 hour time frame, you will likely see that uncertainty already starting to creep in the markets, trading sideways, not moving in any particular direction up or down. Relatively speaking, so it does have somewhat of a no-fly zone. If you do have that support and resistance, you do see what goes down comes up, what goes up comes down, and so on and so forth. So we aren't seeing any clear path besides those sideways movements. Now, the question is, why is the markets acting so uncertain? Of course, we know, guys, when it comes to any huge fundamental event, sometimes the markets may find themselves in a position prior to the event of consolidating, trying to find their bearings, trying to find essential comfort in the area in which they currently are now before the release of the information, and then taking new ground. Now, if tomorrow's minutes report essentially comes out negative dollar, you potentially could see the end of this run as it pertains to the historical high. So you may have a lot of traders already positioning themselves for a downward fall, depending on what happens tomorrow with the FOMC minutes report. Of course, we do see it is coming off the back of a rate cut, which took place there last month. So if we do see essentially the reasons behind the cut, is it due to the fact that the US economy isn't as strong as we would like to believe? Are there some pieces of information in which the FOMC board essentially saw that we everyday individuals just wouldn't have had the opportunity to see? And of course, when we do see that information, could we be looking at opportunities on the downside there? So a lot of people may be looking at it from that perspective. But guys, generally in trading record highs, and this is one I was actually going to write an article about, but a lot of people usually look to the previous high level. A lot of traders, if they are optimistic as far as this continuing upwards, they may find themselves in a position of creating somewhat of a resistance, and saying if the markets break out of that resistance the day after, they may have pending orders for the trend to continue upwards. If you're looking at the RSI, the volumes, you can see, relatively speaking, this is relatively overbought. It is relatively overbought. Usually, when we do see the RSI is essentially at 70 and above, or close to 70, this is essentially overbought. And we haven't seen the markets this high damn near since December of 2017. So it's damn near 2 years since we've seen buying volume essentially past this position there. So it would be interesting to see if it can do so over the next few days, and potentially again tomorrow's FOMC could be the catalyst. Moving on, and let's look at gold. Now, gold, again, we did have that huge fall from grace, unlike what we are seeing in the S&P. S&P is going up, and guys, of course, we know the correlation. When we do see the S&P go up, we do see essentially go down, just due to the fact that investors don't see the value in the safe haven investment when everything is, let's say, rosy with general money market. So as the indexes and equities have been going up, the safe haven instruments have essentially been going down. But what we do see, and again, this is one to look at, especially in correlation with the S&P, to see how that could move. As it pertains to gold, yes, we had that drop. Then we had the potential for a rise. Now, in rising, gold has essentially found resistance down there at 1470. And now what we are essentially anticipating is one of two things. Firstly, could this break in to those areas? If it does break in, let's say to around the 1476 areas and whatever else, could we see what we saw the last few times gold was trading in that price range? Could we see a lot of buying take place? Could we see a lot of bullish opportunities? But at the same time, you do see some uncertainty in those zones as well. So it would be a one to consider absolutely on the upside, especially if from a trading perspective, you can clearly see where the RSI is. It is around 44, 45, which is relatively speaking closer to being oversold than overbought. So you may be asking yourself the question, could there be more bullish and longer term selling volume here than what we see taking place in the current time frame? So these are interesting questions to ask, and of course we will potentially have some of the answers tomorrow. And even in looking at this, we do see some resistance at that level there with the RSI. So potentially you do see all of that resistance there. So could gold, of course, even if it does start to head to those levels there, you may even see some opportunities taking us to around these levels there. So it depends. It absolutely depends on the magnitude of tomorrow's announcements. Of course, this is a daily time frame. If you switch time frames, you may have a different perspective as to what is currently going on. On a 4-hour time frame, you do see where we are currently positioned, a lot of uncertainty as it pertains to the volume. So you may be asking yourself the question, if it starts to head to around the 60 point level, could that be the areas where we really see the buyers enter and again create runs of that nature? So interesting question there. But at the same time, we can't be blinded to only be looking at it from an upwards perspective. If this resistance can be held the last 1, 2, 3 times, could we see a sell-off take place there as well? Essentially creating a new no-fly zone and a new resistance, let's say between 1446 and 1476. So could this be a new $30 range into a lower low? So we had a range there before. Could this be the beginning of a new range of consolidation? So that's another way to potentially look at the situation with gold. And guys, last but not least, euro dollar. Last but not least, euro dollar. Now, from the perspective of euro dollar, if we just zoom out, you can see in the grand scheme of things, it has been trailing. Let's just remove that there and just try and gain some clarity. You can see it has been moving in a position of lower low, somewhat creating this descending triangle on the very, very long term. But in the short term, you do have ascending pressure. So ascending pressure on the short term, descending pressure on the long term. Essentially, with the ascending pressure on the short term, what we are now in position of seeing are the markets trading in a level where we have seen, look at all of that uncertainty there, So we do have a lot of uncertainty currently in this market, especially in and around those areas there. But guys, once you pass that uncertainty, again, you do see a huge amount of buying, and so on and so forth on the other side of that resistance or uncertainty. So the question is, and to be honest, I'm absolutely, especially if you are looking at the moving averages, yes, you do have that downwards crossover which took place when we had that resistance held, but could we see some volume as it pertains to the buys? Yes, if you're looking at where we are now, it is a resistance. It's clearly a resistance. We do see some resistance even as it pertains to the volume. But similar to the question that we asked earlier on with gold, if the bulls are essentially ready to bring the price back up and enter a position where other bulls can essentially look and be confident enough to continue to buy and support this market? Could we be looking at a further rise potentially towards those ceilings in which we did see take place there before? So a lot of questions. We do not have the answers now, but absolutely at 7 p.m. GMT tomorrow, when we do have the the FOMC minutes report essentially released, we may potentially be in a position of having some more clarity. So a lot of opportunities. The eyes of the trading world would be at the precipice of those numbers there tomorrow. So guys, good luck for those of you who will be trading. Any issues, any questions in which you may have, do feel free to reach out to myself, Eliman Dambell, or us here at Tradeview Markets. So until next time, I do bid you a farewell and good luck for tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.